Per the AP, Syria's foreign minister held a rare meeting with an Israeli delegation in Paris on Tuesday, the Syrian state-run news agency reported. The talks were brokered by the United States, which has been pushing for Syria and Israel to normalize relations, the report said. The SANA news agency said Foreign Minister Assad al-Shibani met with Israeli officials to discuss de-escalating tensions and restoring a 1974 ceasefire agreement. Syrian officials have acknowledged holding indirect talks with Israel to diffuse tensions. There was no immediate confirmation of such a meeting from Israel. Tensions have soared between the two neighboring countries following the overthrow of Syrian President Bashar Assad in December. Israeli forces seized control of a UN-patrolled buffer zone in Syria shortly after Assad's overthrow and carried out airstrikes on military sites in what officials said was aimed at creating a demilitarized zone south of Damascus. Israel has said it will not allow hostile forces to establish themselves along the frontier, as Iranian-backed groups did during Assad's rule. It distrusts Syria's new government, which is led by former Islamist insurgents. Syrian President Ahmad al-Sharaa, a former al-Qaeda commander who severed ties with the militant group years ago, has pledged to build a new country that respects the rights of minorities, but sectarian violence has erupted on a number of occasions, raising concerns about the country's fragile transition. Israel stepped up its intervention when violence erupted in Syria's Sweda province last month between Bedouin clans and government forces on one side and armed groups from the Druze religious minority on the other. The conflict then prompted airstrikes against Syrian forces by Israel in defense of the Druze before a truce mediated by the U.S., Turkey, and Arab countries halted most of the fighting. Israel said it was acting to protect the Druze, who are seen as a loyal minority in Israel and often serve in the military. Israel launched dozens of airstrikes on convoys of Syrian forces around Sweda and struck the headquarters of the Syrian Ministry of Defense in the heart of Damascus, Syria's capital.
All right, and Syrian officials say an Israeli attack killed 3 soldiers near the capital Damascus, though Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the toll has risen to 6, all members of the 44th Division. An official at the Defense Ministry speaking on the condition of anonymity said an Israeli drone targeted one of the military buildings of the 44th Division of the Syrian army in Kiswa, west of Damascus. Israel has carried out hundreds of strikes in Syria since an Islamist-led alliance toppled longtime ruler Bashar al-Assad in December. It has also opened talks with the interim authorities in Damascus. Earlier Tuesday, Syrian media reported that a young man was killed in an Israeli strike on a home in the village of Taranja on the formerly Syria-controlled side of the armistice line of the Golan Heights. Syria Foreign Ministry condemned the Israeli attacks on its territory. It also condemned Israeli forces' incursion into the town in the Quneitra countryside, their arrest campaigns against civilians, and their announcement of the continuation of their illegal presence on the summit of Mount Hermon and the buffer zone. Since Assad's overthrow, Israel has occupied much of the UN-patrolled demilitarized zone of the formerly Syria-controlled side of the armistice line, including the summit on Mount Hermon, the region's highest peak. Last week, Syrian Foreign Minister Assad al-Shibani met Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer in Paris to push for a return to the arrangements that had been in place since 1974 disengagement agreement.
Israel seized the Golan Heights from Syria in the 1967 Mideast War and later annexed the strategic plateau in a move that has only been recognized by the United States. The rest of the international community views the Golan Heights as occupied Syrian territory, as well they should. The story sort of highlights the very complicated political nature of really any country in the Middle East. We've got a lot of different factions sort of vying for control of countries with borders that were essentially established by early colonizers. Syria is a very ethnically and religiously diverse country. You've got the Syrian government, Islamic population with their own sort of political differentiations. You've got the Kurds in the north who still fighting essentially for their own country, kind of in a similar struggle to Israel, but without really any sort of colonial aspects in there. They sort of rose to power in the northern occupied territory. Initially, the nation was referred to as Rojava, based on the teachings of a man by the name of Öcalan, currently held by Turkey. Their struggle has oddly enough been supported by Israel, despite the fact that politically they're sort of on the opposite end of the spectrums. The Rojavans were sort of known as what is called anarcho-communists. The Israeli government, very different, kind of essentially a similar neoliberal capitalist country. And that's sort of the way it goes in the Middle East. You've got, as I said here, a former al-Qaeda minister is currently in the government that seems to be backed up by the United States. They're not supporting Israel creating this demilitarized zone. Israel's sort of backing the Druze people because they're beneficial for them. The current Syrian government is kind of caught between all these different forces vying for control. This is the Middle East that we have today, a region with lines essentially drawn at random, or at least lines drawn and created into countries for the benefit of former colonial powers, and everybody who's currently living there is sort of just left to clean up the mess that was left to them. Where do we at AT News stand on this story? Peace is good. Hopefully they work this out. Hopefully Israel backs off. This is sort of just, part and parcel for them at this point, is just exercising their authority in other countries, trying to sort of seize additional territory, regardless of whether or not it's territory that, historically speaking, would have been seen, at least according to them, as part of Israel. That's sort of just the same colonial project continuing on, seizing up territory, backing allies who back you, going after people who are sort of independent and don't have a lot of support from other countries. Syria has kind of has had difficult relations with countries around them. Turkey especially. Turkey and the Syrian government are kind of on board with going after the Rojavans, or the occupied territory of northern Syria. The Kurds and the Turks have had a lot of issues over the years. People far more educated on this than I am can fill you in on that. But this is sort of the ultimate problem here, is just how just a small conflict can kind of escalate and bring in all of these other countries, and can leave us with decades of diplomatic issues that need to be solved after the situation in Gaza is resolved, God willing. The fallout from it is just it's going to be there. It's going to be for future generations to deal with. Dave for AT News. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Really helps out the channel.